Welcome, welcome, and it's that time of the week again. It's the ORT Jet Business Show. I'm your host, David Zidel, and we're going to talk business. On the show with us tonight, we've got Alon Alkalay. He's a Senior Privacy Counsel at Bolt. Alon has been working at the intersection of technology, law, ethics, and the future of artificial intelligence. Alon is a Joburg-based legal and compliance specialist with Bolt. And when you hear Bolt, you must probably think just about the taxis. It does include that, but it's a lot more than that Alon will talk about, because it's a global mobility company. And he serves as a Senior Privacy Counsel within the international legal and compliance team. Sounds very legalistic to me. He'll unpack that for us and tell us what that is. While many people think, as I said, that it's only a ride-hailing platform, it's actually a lot broader than that. And it operates across the globe, from e-bikes and scooters to food delivery and digital mobility solutions. But we're not going to focus too much on that tonight, because our conversation tonight will go far beyond transport. Alon has become deeply involved in the rapidly evolving world of AI governance, and is helping organizations understand not only how artificial intelligence works, but also the ethical, legal, and business challenges that come with it. From AI agents and automation, to privacy, to fraud, to regulation, and the future of work. We'll unpack what artificial intelligence really is, how businesses are already using it, and why understanding AI may soon become as important as understanding the whole internet itself. We'll also explore how governments around the world are trying to regulate AI, what Europe's groundbreaking AI laws could mean for South Africa, and how ordinary people, not just coders or tech experts, can prepare themselves for an AI-driven future. And Alon, we're going to come to the conversation with you in a second, but I always start with a little bit of a business story. And we are on chapter 7 now of the lessons that I've taken from my book called Life on the Run, the 18 Steps to Success. And this lesson talks around doing the wrong thing can ruin your confidence. And I think it's Einstein who had a quote, and he said, if you try get a fish to climb a tree, it'll feel like it's a failure its whole life. So when you're doing the wrong thing, no matter if you're good at something, if you're not doing that something, you're going to feel like you're a failure. And I might have shared this with you before, I'm not sure, but there's a Japanese concept called ikigai. And ikigai is at the center, the intersection of 4 main things. And if I can ask you, if you're looking at going into a new business or doing something new, or just evaluating where you're at, have a look at this and ask yourself these 4 questions. Are you doing what you love? Are you doing what you love and you're good at it? Are you doing what you love, you're good at it, and the world needs it? And then the last component of that is, are you doing what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and can you get paid for it? And if you can find, if you look at it like circles and they're crossing over each other, that middle bit, if you can find something that covers those 4 areas, then you'll have a wonderful and a successful life. So that's the business lesson for tonight. But we got more lessons to come from Alon. So Alon, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I just want to ask you before we get going, really, just to get the bolts out of the way of what it is. So I've always when somebody said to me, Bolt, I've always thought of the taxis. But you say it's a global tech company. So can you really explain to us what it is and what it does?
Yeah. So Bolt, at its essence, it's a mobility company. They want to build cities for people and not cars, essentially. So the whole concept behind Bolt is to actually provide mobility solutions for any journey that you may need in your life, whether that's to get around the block, to drive down to the coast, or to go and see a friend in a neighboring city. So ultimately, it's about creating those mobility solutions and connecting people to them through technology, of course, through a super app, an app that gives you everything in one place. And to do that, obviously, we need to responsibly process data. We need to connect people around the world, and we need to basically build and maintain the systems that make that all work for millions and millions of customers around the world at the same time.
And you're obviously gathering some very sensitive information about people, both themselves and their credit cards and things like that. So monitoring that becomes very important.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's why we have, a dedicated legal and compliance team headquartered in Estonia, which is where the company is from. And we have people in almost every country that we operate as a business. We have, regional legal counsels in those countries, and we have central privacy teams and compliance teams that oversee things from the center.
And your title is Senior Privacy Counsel. Just tell us what that is.
Yeah, so look, I mean, privacy counsels today, they're specialists who have studied and understood how data is regulated. A privacy counsel works very closely with the business. They walk them through, if there's a new feature that's being rolled out. We recently rolled out, or not so recently, but we rolled out something called audio trip recording to make our app safer for people. And that would undergo a privacy assessment to align it to the principles set out in privacy laws. If we're expanding into new markets, we need to be compliant. We need to respect the local approaches to how we should be processing data, interact with regulators, of course, help the business do business through deals and contracts. So across the board, privacy counsels are helping the business move forward and innovate.
So your background is in law?
Correct. Yeah, I'm an admitted attorney. I've basically gone up over the years through litigation, technology contracting, and obviously specializing in data protection, privacy, and now AI governance.
And you were doing that before the AI came about. Well, what drew you to learning about and being interested in the privacy thing?
Yeah, so actually it all started after I completed my articles. I did an LLM and in cyber law. And
so just an LLM stands for?
A master's of law. And I was deciding on a research topic, and I actually came across autonomous vehicles at the time. And while I was reading up to prepare a thesis for it, I came across the European Union's GDPR, which is kind of like South Africa's POPI Act, the privacy law. And a little bit cliche, but I fell in love at that point, and that took me down the journey. So I actually didn't end up writing the thesis on AI vehicles, but we've kind of come full circle. So it's quite interesting.
So it's interesting you said you fell in love with it, because just going back to the ikigai concept, it's doing something you love, and I presume you're good at it, and hopefully making money from it, and the world definitely needs it. So you're looking at those four things all in one.
Sure, I'd agree.
Yeah. When you had a look at the thesis, where did you go from there? Then you started doing your thesis. Was your first job, or is your first job at Bolt? Or just take us through your work history.
Yeah. So I mean, after the thesis, I actually moved into a tech law consultancy and worked across Africa on all forms of digital laws. So privacy laws, electronic transaction laws, cyber laws. I worked with the African Union at a point, did some work for the European Commission. So I got quite embedded into these types of laws across the continent. And after that, I did a pivot, and I ended up working at a law firm in Cape Town called Lighthouse Law. And over there, I was basically specializing in technology law contracting for multinationals around the world. And I knew at that time, the opportunity hadn't arisen to move full-time into privacy, and that popped up eventually. And I've been at Bolt since then. And now my ambit spans across African international markets doing just that.
So if you're involved in privacy, am I allowed to ask you what you do? Because
Sure.
That's not private. So what is the things that are private? What are the things that you're concerned about along privacy? So what are companies, and what is Europe trying to control by looking at the privacy laws? What are they protecting? Who are they protecting, and how and why?
Yeah, look, I mean, it ultimately comes down to like fundamental human rights, actually. In most constitutions, if there is a constitution in a country, there's generally a right to privacy. And obviously in the modern day and age, how you interpret that, it varies. With you've got influencers, you've got celebrities. Everyone has a different expectation of privacy. But ultimately, as we move into a digital, or we're already in a digital world, but as we move into an increasingly digital and automated and almost agentic world, privacy becomes really important. The AI, which we'll get to shortly, I mean, ultimately AI is trained on data, and data in some cases is private. So, not everyone may want some private information of them landing up being used to train the next AI model.
And you used a word there that I've heard a lot, agentic. Well, just tell us, does it mean it's an agent? And am I correct on saying that?
Yeah, you're kind of spot on. So, and we'll get to obviously what AI is, but I think that we've been for the past year or so in the chatbot era, where everyone's typing in a prompt into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and getting an output. So it's a kind of like a one-way interaction where you're in control. Agentic AI is actually we're there, and we're moving very, very quickly on that path. And what it essentially means is an AI is not just waiting for your instruction, but it's receiving an instruction and taking action on your behalf and making its own decisions depending on the frameworks you set up for it and the scaffolding to achieve an outcome. So yes, there's a lot more independence, and it is essentially acting as an agent on your behalf to achieve your desired outcome.
So I was going to ask you, if you explain it simply what AI is. Have you just explained that, or is there something else you can add to that?
Look, I mean, I think it's interesting to state that AI isn't a new concept. The term was coined actually in 1950, somewhere around there at the time. And it went through like a period of time where actually technology and the mathematics and the science couldn't really demonstrate what AI really was. But over time, with mathematicians and scientists and all that, they got to a point where they were creating models, essentially, that are trained on data and that can do certain things and achieve certain outcomes on their own, essentially. And essentially, that's what AI is. You see it in your Netflix recommendations. You see it in Google Maps. You see it in the chatbots that you're interacting with. You see it in the tools that you're using to create videos and pictures, and in many other places around the world, including even military using it now in the ways that they fight combat. So AI is everywhere right now, and the foundation of it is really algorithms and models trained on data to achieve certain outcomes.
So as you're mentioning this, I'm getting more and more questions are coming into my brain that I want to ask you, but we'll get to those after the break.
Sure.
Welcome back. I'm David Zidel. You're listening to the ORT Jet Business Show, and we're busy talking to Alon Alkalay. And Alon was just explaining a little bit around the beginning of what AI really is. And you mentioned that, and I never really thought of it, like if you're using Waze, it's now knows which route you normally go, and it's feeding that information in. You mentioned Netflix. I watch a movie, it brings up other things that I might be interested in. So these things are useful for me if I give it the information. But everybody's scared of what it's going to do with the information. Is it a case of we should be open with it and provide the information, or should we hold some things back?
No, look, I mean, the reality is if you choose to withhold it, nothing's going to really change. Those models, essentially, that power different tools, they're trained already. And what can happen, yes, and it should be happening, is that user data, including your data, is being used to obviously continuously train and improve those models. So taking the Waze example, if you're sitting in traffic, you've got your Waze on, and I'm inferring here, this isn't a fact, but the model could likely be saying, okay, you're sitting in traffic in this state on this road. It took a bit long. You decided to take a turn off here. Like all of those things may be going back and retraining the model on recommendations for future people driving the same route. So yeah, look, I mean, ultimately it's a choice. And I think it's great. And it's very important to be aware of the fact that actually more and more today, since the introduction of privacy laws, companies are eventually catching up and providing users with self-determination, essentially, a way to control how different companies are using your data, it's important to be aware of it and to maybe just play around and explore a bit and see what options are there, because there probably are more things available to you as a user than you're aware of.
So one of those things, if I go to a website, a random website, and it says we're using cookies and allow or deny, what is the benefit of allowing? What's the benefit of denying those rights when it asks about the cookies? And what exactly are those cookies?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in terms of the benefits, I mean, the benefit is if you're denying it, or sorry, if you're accepting it, the benefit's more for the provider of that website. They may be using it to market to you and direct targeted advertisements to you. So perhaps you want to see those kind of things. That would obviously be using it to maintain their site and make sure that it's working properly. So there are benefits, and some of those things would be happening regardless of whether you consent. You don't need to consent to everything. They can still do certain baseline activities. Look, I mean, what cookies are essentially, they're a little file that sits on your device, and it's a tracker. It essentially will follow you from app to app or site to site, and it will, of course, from a marketing perspective, empower companies to market to you. That is changing, though. There are a range of privacy-enhancing technologies that companies are using, and Google, for example, has been rolling out these kind of things that allow companies to market in a more privacy-compliant way with anonymized data. But cookies can also be there again to make sure that if you're having a problem with your interaction with the service, the cookie could be collecting some data about your device, and it could be useful for you to help resolve some problems.
Yeah. So the next question I have is, if you look at AI agents, can I look at it and say, well, an AI agent is like an electronic or digital employee, or am I wrong to think like that?
Look, I mean, I think where we're going, there are absolutely going to be workforces built up of AI agents, and there's going to be people that are managing and orchestrating those agents. So I mentioned earlier that we're entering an agentic AI phase, and we are there already. But where we're going is really there will be a situation where there is swarms, or I'm calling them swarms, but tens or hundreds of agents that are operating simultaneously and independently in a company, and they essentially would be serving the functions of an employee, but obviously legally, I don't think we could classify them as employee. You're not paying them a salary. They don't have any rights. But yes, in the future workforce, agents are going to be coexisting with employees.
So does that get back to the aspect of what you were saying, that rather than just putting in a prompt where I'm controlling it, these agents control everything around me? Can you explain how that might work and in what specific area?
Yeah, so I mean, this comes down to like a concept called AI engineering, and what it involves is essentially building scaffolding. Imagine scaffolding to hold up a building, building and engineering an environment around these AI agents that treating them almost like interns. You have onboarding plans, you have rules and policies and procedures, you have guidelines on how to approach tasks, you have do not do's, you have do's and don'ts. I'm simplifying this greatly, but it's really creating an architecture around them to make sure that they can achieve the objective with as much accuracy as possible, with as little failure, with as little risk to the business or company that's implementing these agents. Obviously to cooperate and speak together, to be able to follow your company, how actual people in your company work. So it's about engineering that environment. And that is, I think, if you're talking about future professions, it's definitely an interesting one. People that are actually creating the architecture around these agents to help them collectively achieve outcomes for a business.
So I think if you're creating an agent, you've got to understand deeply what you're doing, exactly how you're doing it, because it's like, as you said, having an intern and you've got to train them to do what you do. But even if I think on my life, what I do, I kind of think, well, every day is kind of different. How do I train someone to do everything I do? Are you saying that you have hundreds of different agents and each one does one specific task? Or are you trying to get to an agent that becomes an electronic you?
Look, it's a very good question. And I think that this will be done differently by different people in different organizations. Yeah, absolutely. It's best practice. And even if you're using just chatbot AIs, splitting the tasks up, it's a basic principle. Same with agentic AI. Yeah, ultimately, it's really about how you're managing them together. And you spoke earlier about, you were speaking about, day to day, things may change for you. And there's another ancillary or related topic called context engineering. And it's about actually building a continuous knowledge base or brain that's actually following, okay, what you as a person or as a company or as a department are doing, and using that to, it's almost like a living knowledge base essentially for these agents to be able to understand what is the current status of everything. So there's a lot of moving parts to get it to work right, and I'm by no means an expert in AI engineering, but it's definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah, because I think even prompting, and I use AI exactly how you explained it. I'll go into ChatGPT and I'll ask it one simple question, and it sometimes gets that wrong. And I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to ask this to do my shopping and my paying accounts and trading shares, I'm not comfortable with that at this stage yet.
Exactly. And I mean, that takes us to AI regulation. These things are not perfect. And I don't know if they will ever be perfect. And there's so many ways in which, as countries and as companies and as even natural persons, we need to actually be considering the limitations and the risks of AI and addressing them. Yeah, maybe we'll speak a bit about that just now.
I want to get on a point, and then I actually want to get to what you're talking about with that. But I've got a daughter in grade 11, and she has to now go, and they've got a letter today to say they've got to go do job shadowing. Are you saying that in order to develop the AI, you're trying to get the AI to shadow what you're doing so it can build its own skills?
Shadowing you, not exactly, but absolutely providing it sufficient context, giving it necessary reference resources. It's all about context, and it's, once it has the context, helping it understand how it should be using that context, what it should be considering, and what it should not be considering, and how you wanted to approach it. And you spoke about this earlier, and you really hit the nail on the head. I think today, for most professionals that have the privilege of using AI in their work, it's the current challenge. It's about codifying how we work. And a lot of us as professionals, we just act autonomously a lot of the time, especially as we've become more experienced. And it's actually an exciting challenge. It's actually seeing how can we take this out of our brain, put it into a system, and start saving our time for the bigger fish, for the more strategic areas where our work would be better served.
So I want to get to that part of, let's say I get an AI agent to trade some shares for me, and it follows, I don't know, some other trading that people are doing, and it's meant to follow exactly what it does and trade what, let's say, Warren Buffett does. If it does something that it shouldn't have, and it either buys some shares for me or sells some shares that I didn't want to sell, legally, who's responsible? Is it me? Is it them? Is it the system? If somebody else programmed this agent for me, are they liable? From a legal point of view, it sounds like this could get very messy.
It can. And I mean, that's where the regulation comes in. So if you look at like what's going on in Europe, the AI Act that they introduced in 2024 came effective in 2025, and it's still in stages becoming effective. But it regulates across different types of stakeholders. So those that are building and developing the AI, the providers, those that are using the AI or rolling it out, deployers in a company, or you personally as an end user. And then there's other parties in between, but they regulate differently against different types of stakeholders. And in that specific example, obviously it will vary between country to country. It will vary based on your user agreement, the terms and conditions with that provider. But ultimately, I would expect, if you're using that today, that those terms and conditions would obviously waive any responsibility for the provider of that tool. But if, for example, you had guided, maybe it doesn't apply so much in this trading example, but if you had guided an agent to do something specifically, to follow instructions, and it maybe went beyond those and did something bad, I mean, really, the question on liability, it's still sitting in the air. We we haven't really seen a lot of jurisprudence or case law around the world on how that liability is actually going to be falling. But it's a very interesting area to follow.
I can imagine at one stage you'll have an AI lawyer fighting against another AI lawyer about what an AI agent did. I hope that's not where we're heading to. But it reminds me of the days of when autonomous cars first came out, and there was this whole big debate. If an autonomous driving car killed a pedestrian, who's liable? Is it the programmer? Is it the owner of the car? Is it, if it's a Tesla car, is it Tesla that's liable? Is that something similar? And just on that, what is the outcome of that with the car, with an autonomous car?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a very interesting question. And again, this is a developing field. But I think that, what I've seen in the past is that that specific field of autonomous vehicles is really, really complex. There are so many different parties that come together to provide an end result. Let's say you're buying a new, like a fully autonomous vehicle, which you can't get in South Africa right now, but if you did, over there you've got the manufacturer, you've got the technology providers, you've got potential other companies providing parts and that will formulate this vehicle. So apportioning liability is immediately difficult, but what we are seeing in some countries, or what I've seen in some countries, is that there's actually a default to actually the insurer for the provider of that vehicle, a lot of laws to help the people who are going to be subject to harm to actually go straight to the insurer, claim damages, and the insurer then figures it out with the manufacturer of the vehicle. So it's very interesting, and I think it's going to vary from country to country, but liability is the biggest topic in autonomous vehicles, yeah.
And that's the biggest one, and that the car is only one specific place. Now, when you've got these AI agents trading across borders, I suppose it becomes even more difficult.
It does, and I mean, if you look at the concept of like harmonization of laws, for a long time, and we're still getting there from a privacy and data protection perspective, it's taken a while for countries, and as I said, we're still not there, to actually harmonize and make their laws almost interoperable, where everyone's following the same principles and standards. And the same thing's going to need to happen with AI. So good news, there is an organization called the OECD, and they actually, from data protection principles to AI governance principles, they've published these kind of principles that a lot of countries are actually using to model and codify their own laws and regulations. So I hope that we will see enough consistency and harmonization between them, so that if there are, disputes or issues arising across countries, across borders, that they can be resolved properly.
And that leads me on to the aspect of what happened in South Africa, where our government used AI to create AI laws, and then it's hallucinated and gave all sorts. Just talk us through what happened there.
Yeah, so I mean, look, first of all, I think it's great that we've seen an AI policy being put forward by South Africa. Right now, we don't have an AI law in South Africa. We have a data protection law, we have a consumer protection law, electronic transaction law. We don't have anything regulating AI right now. And that policy wasn't ever actually meant to be an AI law. It was meant to be the harness or the infrastructure that would connect all of our existing laws together and regulators and formulate some form of way to regulate this. Now, what ended up happening is actually a form of automation bias. So automation bias is when you as a user or a person or a company or department or a country use AI and you intuitively or subliminally believe that whatever it gives you is correct. And that's pretty much what happened. I can't say if there was negligence involved or what, but what ended up happening is that a lot of the academic references that were included in that national policy to inform and substantiate what was being put forward was not real. It was hallucinated, correct. So that policy is being withdrawn, and I think from last I read, it's looking to be reintroduced in November this year. But that's going to essentially be the starting point for regulation of AI in South Africa. There are some influences from Europe, actually, in the way that the European law or regulation distinguishes between prohibited AI, high-risk AI, limited-risk AI. But it will be very different. I think that there's a lot of socioeconomic considerations that the national AI policy is trying to address. giving you an example, I actually asked my domestic a few weeks ago, I said, hey, do you know what AI is? Do you know what artificial intelligence is? She had no clue. And, if we look at Africa, South Africa, I still don't think there's 100% access to internet penetration rate anywhere. And so if some people aren't even on the internet yet, or some people aren't even knowing what AI is or how to use it, countries like South Africa and other African countries will need to, from a policy perspective, ensure that those people aren't left behind. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch.
So if you've got somebody and you ask them a question and they just tell you an untruth, we say, well, they just lie. But with an AI agent or AI bot, we just say, well, they're just hallucinating. But it's the same thing, essentially. It's maybe both are intentional or maybe both are unintentional.
Look, I mean, AI models can be manipulated. There's no doubt about it. And that's also that's a part of AI governance. And it's ensuring that these models are robust.
But
yes,
they can be manipulated, but can they be manipulating? Or can they be doing it intentionally?
Look, I mean, we've seen, and when I say we, I mean, I've seen, across the world, if you look at Facebook or some other companies, there's been a lot of worry around some of the interactions with children, for example, speaking to these AI agents. There's been a lot of suicides. And I think you can say that in some cases, I don't think they would intentionally, these things aren't conscious. They wouldn't intentionally manipulate someone, but without sufficient guardrails, they can go down a path that is actually not to the benefit of the end user that's using them. So absolutely, they need to be very carefully maintained and secured.
The next thing I want to ask you is, what's the most impressive real-world use of AI that you've personally seen recently or in the last while? But we'll do that after the break. You're listening to the ORT Jet Business Show on High FM 101.9. I'm David Zidel, and we're busy getting from AA about AI. And when I say AA, that's Alon Alkalay, and he's busy telling us around the AI agents and unpacked quite a few things around the legalities of it and how it's being used. So my question just before the break was, what's the most impressive real-world use of AI that you've personally seen?
So there's a guy, amazing guy named Demis Habib, and he is the founder of DeepMind, which was acquired by Google years ago. And a few years ago, they basically solved this protein folding problem. And that protein folding problem, I'm not a biologist or anything, I can't speak to the detail, but essentially they used AI to essentially crack the code to understand how proteins in the body actually are formulated and fold. And that discovery, it was never possible. Humans have been trying to do it for a long time, and this AI cracked it. And that is going to be leading the way to numerous medical breakthroughs and discoveries. So it's fascinating. I think there's a documentary on it on Netflix you can go watch.
But if you watch it once, the algorithm's going to feed
potentially,
you.
Yes. But look, in the medical and scientific discoveries, that's really what's blowing my mind. I've heard from a few people at the forefront of the industry that they think, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, most or many human diseases are going to be solved. So that's what excites me right now.
I think that's a great thing you're picking up on, because if you can solve something like that, that leads to other things, and AI can do it at scale and at speed that humans would never be able to do. So you could run trials of drugs maybe that maybe would take 10 years, would take a couple of months.
Yeah.
And it feels like the world is speeding up. And is that correct? It's almost like some people say, yes, let's go fast, and others are like, how do I get off this treadmill?
Yeah. Look, I completely agree. If we look at, obviously, starting with the internet, information was made available. It wasn't easily available, but today you don't need to Google search anything. You just prompt an AI. Hopefully it's not hallucinating. You can obviously validate that. But access to information is abundant. And I think that personally for me, I feel like there's an expectation to stay on top of what's going on more than ever, especially in my industry. And yes, the world is moving really fast. The technology is moving fast. Tomorrow, what we discuss, it may be outdated, So it's definitely an interesting ride. And I think that it's going to be important for us to make sure that, as I mentioned, that no one falls behind. And that's going to really be up to governments and policymakers to consider how do we bring everyone on the journey.
And if somebody listening today like owns a small business, what would you suggest is, where should they start? As you said, not everybody is part of this. How do they start getting involved in using AI in some way, and how do they develop that skill further?
So the question is more from like a productivity automation standpoint, not really a legal compliance standpoint, but we spoke earlier about thinking about your systems, your processes, the tools you use, the things that need to be done every day, essentially. If you're looking at your payroll, you're looking at your contracts with vendors, you're looking at your communications, your marketing databases, understanding your ecosystem obviously is a starting point. Understanding the data that's involved in that, understanding what are the processes and steps and workflows that need to be followed every day or every week to achieve a certain outcome. I would start by just mapping that out, because now more than ever, we were talking about agentic AI. AI tools are able to connect to each other much more than they were months ago, and that's only going to increase. So it's very likely that unless you're on like Microsoft 1995, most of the tools that a small business is using are interoperable and can be connected. And once those connections happen, opportunities arise for you to set up agents to start performing tasks. But before you go there, go back to the basics and really just codify your own understanding of your business, not just operating from intuition or from automatic memory. So I think once you start there, then we spoke about you're not just prompting an AI to do something. That's not going to work. You need to be building, and let's just call it engineering, a sufficient context bank of your business, and obviously just outlining and maybe even brainstorming with AI on what are the things that are achievable, developing a roadmap and starting. But it's not necessarily an easy job for anyone just to do today. I know not everyone is tech savvy. I think there's a whole new profession out there for people to come in and help businesses actually understand how all these things work and translate their businesses into the AI world. So they could definitely obviously be consulting with someone like that.
And I think a lot of the tools that we use, we're not even aware of yet, but AI is already embedded in those tools. And I'm seeing it on the different things that I'm using. Just your normal Microsoft products, it's kind of helping and prompting me along the way already.
Sure.
Now, this might be an unfair question to ask you, because you've come in as the legal counsel and understanding the legalities, and I'm going down a different route. But if we get down to the actual, the ground roots of it, and maybe what AI, and you can tell me that you don't know, and that's fine, but which AI product should somebody start with, and which one do you think they could use? Let's say I've kind of used ChatGPT once or twice, and now I want to do what you're saying. I want to take my business, map it out, and then try get an agent to work for me. How would I actually do that?
It's a good question. So look, I mean, I don't think we're at the point where having all of those capabilities is going to be free and available to everyone. But if you have a budget for it, most of these providers, specifically OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude, they've already set up infrastructure where you can essentially build, whether it's chats or projects that are supplemented by those context layers that I was talking about. So there is a whole, it's not actually new. It's in the past year and a half or so, there's a concept called skill engineering. And that skill engineering is about actually doing what I was talking to you about, setting out workflows, processes, linking it to different documents and knowledge areas and knowledge banks, and essentially engineering an instruction, a recipe for an agent to use to follow and achieve a certain outcome. And that's very much possible. You don't need any fancy tools. You need a basic subscription, and then just to have the understanding of these are the capabilities, because I still think that many people are still just viewing AI or LLMs, we didn't really speak about LLMs, but large language models, that's what ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, all these things are. Viewing them as just like a unilateral, I prompt, you send me a response, but there is much more that can be achieved if you're creating that framework and designing your systems and processes, codifying it, and essentially training up the AI to follow it. And yeah, it's not a perfect process. I would just recommend play around, experiment, and test. That's the only way it's going to get good.
So what I'm hearing from you is there's no one specific one. You'd go to just choose one and start working on that.
Exactly.
And then I would think, and when I have a look at what you're saying, if I look at a franchise business, when somebody is running a business and they want to franchise it out, the first thing they've got to do is understand their business deeply and the systems that work so they can replicate it. And what I'm hearing is you're saying, if you're getting an agent to do it, pretend your business is like a franchise.
Exactly. Management and delegation. Like, we'll speak about that shortly.
Great. So we're going to get to the last little bit of where you see the future of AI, but again, we'll do it after the break.
Cool.
Alon, just before the break, I was listening to what you were saying, and I was thinking, what are the qualities that, if we have a world full of these AI, what are the human qualities that become almost impossible to replace? So what should we focus on? What qualities should we focus on that are harder to replace?
It's a really, really good question. And I think I'm going to start with soft skills, right? AIs, they're smarter than us, absolutely. And they're going to be able to do everything we can do and much, much more. But they can't console a colleague who's feeling down. They can't, well, they probably actually could motivate you or things like that. But the soft skills around what it is to be human, to recognize emotion, and there will be AI systems that can recognize emotion, but really focusing on soft skills. Look, ultimately, communication and management, I was speaking about that right before the break, but understanding, enhancing your own ability to manage and to delegate and to envision how you can achieve an objective through the use of AI. I think that's great. And so for those that are in management or leadership positions, I think they're already in a strong place to be. And for those that aren't, now is the time to actually think about just sharpening those skills. Adaptability. So being able to learn quickly and relearn really quickly. We were discussing how quickly and ever evolving the industry is, and not just the industry, society is going to become. And from a job profession perspective, I think that's going to be absolutely essential. You need to be able to move and not attach too much actually to even, we were talking about building systems and AI skills and all that. That's relevant today. Last year, we were looking into other things, and next year, we're going to be looking into other things. We have to adapt and move very quickly. I think that really, those are some of you asked the question, what can't the AI replicate? It is what makes us human. It's the judgment. It's the taste. It's about, knowing what decisions to make when. I think that's absolutely, it should be something that we should be enhancing and protecting in ourselves, because that's going to be ever more important when we've got worlds of AI agents that need to be managed.
So we're heading towards the end of the hour, and I've got a few more questions I want to ask. So I'm going to try and wrap a couple in together. So of the AI world, what are the things that excite you most and worry you most about the future of AI? And if I can wrap that together with what was going to be my next question of, if you had a couple of teenagers today, or you're talking to some teenagers, what are the 2 or the 3 most important skills you would tell them to encourage them to develop for this future that we're heading into?
Yeah, look, I mean, I covered earlier that I'm fascinated by the use of AI in medicine and scientific discovery. Really, that's really deeply invigorates me. And I would love to see a world where none of us or our family or our friends need to be sick anymore. Fantastic. What worries me, honestly, is how society is going to adapt to, an AI-filled world. the workplace is going to change. I mean, I don't want to scare anyone, but there are huge amounts of layoffs already happening around the world. So just understanding how society and the economy actually adapts and what it's going to look like, I have no clue, and I don't think many people do, but that does worry me. And coming back to your last question, I think almost just to repeat what I was saying earlier, soft skills, communication, leadership and management, adaptability, those are key traits that I would want to be enhancing in my own children as I brought them up. It's not going to really be as much about what does the child know substantively. Can they code? Obviously, yes. I think there is a benefit to being able to understand technically how systems work, because then pairing that with creativity, you can create things and you can find solutions to things. But really, those human elements, and we were talking about Demis Habib earlier, who's the founder of DeepMind. I was reading an interview with him today, and one of his answers was taste, human judgment. Like, that is going to be ever more important. So making sure that children and teenagers are developing that and focusing on the soft side of themselves, their soft skills, I think that's honestly where I'd focus in the coming years.
So I think it's a great point to leave it. Is it about whatever you're learning, you must almost learn that you can relearn. So what I'm hearing from you is teach your kids that whatever they've learned, they can adapt it and be flexible to change what they're doing as the world changes around them.
Exactly.
I think it's a great point to leave it on. And I know this discussion has been mostly around AI, and your title is Senior Privacy Counsel at Bolt. We touched on the privacy and the law bit, but thank you so much for bringing in the rest of the discussion. And,
absolutely.
And this demystifying a bit this AI world that we're in and that we're heading into even further.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This has been the ORT Jet Business Show. I'm David Zidel, and I look forward to being with you again next week.